think we can get started. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Yarik Amran, consultant for strategic solutions at Divine. We appreciate you taking the time to be part of this discussion on OT resilience, which has become one of the most critical priorities for operational leaders, CISOs, and executive teams globally. Over the next hour, we'll explore how ransomware cyber threat is reshaping operational risk and what organizations can do to strengthen resilience both now and in the future. It is my privilege to be joined by Namas Saroja, Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft. Namas works closely with enterprise and industrial organizations, advising security strategy at the highest levels. His perspective effectively connects operational reality with risk at the board level. We're also joined by Sai Rukshiv, CISSP, Cybersecurity Solutions Consultant at Divine. Sai works hands-on with OT and hybrid IT/OT environments, helping organizations move from assessment to implementation. Today's conversation is designed to bring together strategic, technical, and governance perspective. So before we move forward, I just want to cover some quick housekeeping. We'll cover questions in a dedicated Q&A segment at the end, so please feel free to submit them as we go. The session is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with all the registrants. If you'd like to speak during Q&A, please use the raise hand feature, and we will unmute you. And if you experience any technical issues, please try rejoining. If the issue persists, please message the host privately. With that, let's move to core discussion. So I just want to kind of briefly outline what some of the topics we'll be covering in today's discussions. First, we'll set the context around OT cybersecurity and why it has become a distinct risk category. Second, we'll examine the economics of a ransomware attack, not theory, but actual business impact. Third, we'll discuss prevention realities inside OT environments. Fourth, recovery because resilience is tested when prevention fails. And then we'll look at future readiness, including sandbox environments and structured approaches. And finally, we'll close with a quick case study and some key takeaways. So, Namos, before we go any deeper, would you agree that OT risk today requires sort of a different lens than traditional IT security?
Absolutely, Yavar. OT environments have unique challenges, and downtime is not an option. Safety and reliability concern and legacy systems are common across the industry. All these factors fundamentally change the risk equation. That's why addressing OT risk requires a business alignment with the technical, the challenges. So both needs to be aligned in a right way.
Well said, Domas. And so let's begin with the reality of ransomware in OT environments. So I just kind of want to begin with the scale of the issue. Ransomware attacks have increased 87% year over year. 90% of organizations have experienced at least one damaging OT cyber event in a 2-year period, half of them suffering downtime exceeding 4 weeks. So, Namas, when you look at these numbers, what do you think concerns you the most?
Oh, yeah. So what stands out concern the most is the duration of the impact, not merely the volume of attacks. 4 weeks of downtime in an OT environment disturbs supply chain, compromises safety, strains compliance obligations, and erodes customer trust. The impact can be more severe if the attackers do the double extortion ransomware scenarios, where the attackers not only encrypt the systems but also exfiltrate sensitive data such as billing records or the proprietary business information and threaten the public disclosure. That's why OT cyber incidents are no longer just a cybersecurity challenge. They represent significant business risk and a critical business continuity issue, and that concerns me a lot.
Thank you, Namas. And Sai, from a technical standpoint, why is downtime in OT environments lasting this long?
Yeah, thank you, Ever. As Namas rightly said, right, it's not about the frequency, but it's about the impact duration. And if we try to understand, take a step back and understand why exactly is that duration really stands out rather than frequency, it's a complexity of landscape, right? How are these OT systems built, right? It's not a simple server room, it's not a simple data warehouse, right? It's a whole chunk of IT and OT technologies working in hand, and which are very complex, right? And this involves validating PLCs, there will be SCADA system, and there will be a lot of firmwares, right, which work in hand. So it's not as simple as, you turn on and turn off a uh, light bulb or something like that, right? So I think a recovery must be methodological rather than you just try to be random at it, right? A random plan doesn't work. So it's something like you're not just restoring service. So being in a very big landscape, right? So downtime in OTA environments is like forever sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you, Sai. And I think one more number stands out: 4,000 cyber attacks across industrial and critical environments. That, I think, tells us something important, that it's not really a rare event. It's not a hypothetical scenario. It's an operating reality. When 90% of organizations experience a damaging OT event, the conversation has to shift. It's no longer about whether you'll be targeted. It's about how prepared you are when it happens. So the real question for leadership is simple: are we structurally resilient, or are we assuming recovery will somehow work itself out? So I think we've established the scale and inevitability of the risk. Before we go further, we need clarity on one thing. When we say OT, what exactly are we referring to? The term OT is often used broadly, but includes a wide range of systems that operate physical processes. Sai, can you simplify this for the audience?
Definitely. OT is, you know, OT means operational technology. What exactly that is? That means like some technology stack which is enabling your operations. We can see it that way, right? But it's not just simple systems that we are monitoring, used for monitoring, right? Because a lot of us think OT systems are big monitor screens which are used to monitor physical operations, right? This is not just limited to that. It is one part of it, right? It also covers a lot of ICS, industrial control systems, okay, where a lot of controls of different areas of OT systems are at a place, right? And there are SCADA systems, there are PLCs, and there are huge infrastructures like direct process controls as well, right? So as the IoT and OT industrial landscape is increasing, these structures are really going for a toss because the complexities again increase, right? In simple terms, if we see a machine and that is spinning, that is pumping some material, right, and people are working around it and regulate something physical, operationally, right? So yeah, we can term it as it is falling under OT.
Thank you, Sai. And I think that design philosophy is very important because security was not the primary objective when many of these systems were initially built.
Yeah.
Namas, how does that historical design reality impact today's risk posture?
Yeah, you said it correctly, Yavar. It means that we are retrofitting security into environments that were never architected with security as a core requirement. Many of the OT environments, they just talk about the supply chain and the production and all, and they never meant to secure the core environment, right? And many OT systems continue to operate on legacy operating system, rely on minimal or non-existent authentications, and use protocols that lacks encryption or the native security controls. Still, we can see that some of the OT environment, they have the clear password. That's a plain text password which can be transmitted across the environment, right? So, and also, most of the environments, there is no backup solutions in place. As a result, securing OT environment requires a fundamental different approach than the traditional IT. So one that carefully balances operational constraints, safety considerations, and the life cycle of those systems. These are all very critical. And again, we can do many alternative security controls to protect those environment as well. That we will
Yeah.
see it in the later part, yeah.
Thank you, Namas. So I think that makes the challenge pretty clear. We're trying to secure an infrastructure that was designed for continuity, not threat resistance, which raises the next question. If these systems were not built with security in mind, how are we supposed to evaluate and strengthen them today? So we now understand what falls under OT. The next step is understanding what that actually looks like inside an organization. So I think we've established two things. OT environments are pretty highly exposed, and many of them were not really designed with security in mind. And the natural question becomes, how do we systemically approach resilience? This is where structure matters. We use a simple lens to evaluate OT maturity, VVSRR, visibility, vulnerability, remediation, resiliency, supported by governance and skills. Sai, where do most organizations actually struggle in this sequence?
Yeah, with a given nature of how they are built, very vast, right? Everyone feel that, okay, if some issues or some threat emerges, right? Maybe our remediation is in question. That is how they think. They believe that, okay, as remediation is a challenge, let us be strong at it. And they attain that maturity that, okay, and they feel that we are strong in remediation. In reality, many of them struggle with the visibility, right? There is no proper visibility around things. If you cannot really produce your complete asset inventory of what your OT ecosystem is made up of, right? Including the minute and granular details like firmware versions, network dependencies, vulnerability management, procedures, all of the efforts that you're making uh, in regards to your remediation is a guesswork, proper guesswork, and you just like it more and more because you think it's okay, it is under control. This is what my asset is. This is limited, right? That is how they think, and you know the guesswork doesn't scale in OT at times, right? So that will be becoming a very big struggle in this VV RRS sequence. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Sai. And so without visibility, everything else becomes reactive. Namas, from a leadership standpoint, how does a lack of visibility actually affect governance?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Yavar. And as Sai pointed out very correctly, visibility is the key. If the organization don't have the visibility, that creates a significant governance blind spot. And asset discovery is the foundational to the voting, and it's a table stake. Widely adopted frameworks such as Purdue Enterprise Reference Architecture and maybe international standards like IEC 62443 emphasize the importance of comprehensive asset visibility as a prerequisite for the effective risk governance. That is mandated. And when executives are making investment decisions or attesting to risk exposure without accurate asset visibility, they are effectively operating on assumptions rather than facts. In OT environments, those assumptions translate directly into operational safety and financial risk, and assumptions in OT environments are very expensive.
Yeah, and I think we should go deeper. Visibility is foundational, vulnerability comes next. Sai, is patching an OT as straightforward as it is in IT?
I wish it is, yeah, but it's not, honestly speaking, because like in IT, you see every Tuesday Microsoft releases a patch, and every AppSec engineer out there will just wait for that notification, right? So are the other vendors. They just choose one day in the week and try to release those patches. But it doesn't happen that way in OT. Even if you wait for a decade at times for a legacy system which handles your PLC, SCADA, there won't be any patches from the vendor who built it, right? You cannot really simply schedule a downtime because there will be running production, monetary, and revenue aspects linked to it. Because these OT systems continuously have to work in the production environment, right? So like, no, it's really not that straightforward. You should really go with appropriate planning because without responsible patching in OT, right? You will really take a very big hit with your revenue and the way you're making money so that your business runs, right? So responsible patching in OT requires a proper testing, a proper validation, and how you're coordinating with other operational teams, right? Because when we speak about production environment, a lot of operation teams work in hand to hand, right? So there should be a very accurate coordination in between them when there is something scheduled to test and being validated to patch. Yeah.
Thank you, Sai. And I think all that leads to resiliency. Numbers, how would you define resiliency different from remediation?
Oh, yeah. So all of us know that remediation focus on identifying and fixing specific weakness after they discovered. And resiliency, on the other hand, is about ensuring the organization can continue operating even when failures or attacks occur, right? In the current environment or in the current scenario, any organizations can be attacked at any point in time. So no organization is safe. Even though if we have the entire security controls in place, there could be some basic weakness the attackers can exploit and they can get into the environment. So the question would be, yes, absolutely, we need to protect our environment. No question on this. But how is our resiliency, right? That is very important from the industry standpoint. And resiliency is not just the business resiliency, but also it encompasses capabilities like network segmentation, right? And regularly tested OT incident response plans. Verified, the backup integrity, like having an immutable backup in place, and also a clear executive decision-making frameworks to manage disturbance effectively. So these are all compasses the resiliency, not only just business resilience with the backups.
Well said. And so I think that makes VVSRR not a checklist, it's a maturity journey. Many organizations are overestimating where they stand on that journey. So far we discussed the scale of OT cyber risks. We've clarified what falls under OT, and we've introduced a structured maturity lens through VVSRR. Now, in the next segment, we'll begin with the financial implications of getting this wrong, followed by underrating risks, understating risks, challenges, recovery considerations, and practical prevention insights. So I think I want to start with something leadership understands immediately, which is cost. I want to make this practical. Consider an organization with an annual revenue of about $250 million. That translates to roughly $685,000 per day. If recovery to operational normalcy takes 6 weeks, that's roughly 30 business days of disruption. That's over $20 million in direct revenue exposure. I want to let that sit. And this does not include ransom payment, forensic investigation, legal advisory, regulatory implications, supply chain penalties, or reputational impact. So, Namas, when boards evaluate cyber risks, do they model it this way?
Not consistently, yeah. And as you pointed out, very important things like the forensic investigation, legal advisory, regulatory implications, supply chain penalties. Everything needs to be considered as part of the entire decision framework, right? But many boards still frame cybersecurity primarily in terms of the IT data breaches and information loss. But now it's changed in the past 2 years. Many boards are still talking about the entire holistic way of how the cost will be defined. Especially in OT environments, the most significant financial and operational impact comes from production outages. Very, very important, right? And if the production is halted for 4 weeks or 5 weeks, how much impact it would increase? That the board will usually they will consider. If not, they have to. And also when the operations at halt and the revenue flow is interrupted, the risk profile shifts dramatically.
Yeah.
So it is from IT concern to a core business and enterprise risk. That's what it shifts. And board needs to consider all those activities.
Thank you, Namas. And Sai, a question for you. Why does recovery in OT usually take this long?
Yeah, because see, yeah, we're looking at those numbers, we can try to understand one thing, right? These big numbers only happen when multiple things are being impacted, right? As we just spoke a few minutes back, how the OT environments are built. They're built very complex. Built with many things embedded together, right? So it's not like you're just dealing with a single point of failure and everything else might work fine once you fix it, right? You cannot really power systems back and without checking the risk risk on safety, right? Whatever related to operational technology is closely traveling with risk to human beings, risk to life, right? So you have got a lot of things you need to check day in day out if you want to restore. Once you are really in a position that okay, everything is fixed. Now let me get back to production, right? You got to validate a lot of things like firmware, safety controls, how exactly the aligned sequence logic is working, a lot of things. So this definitely will take considerable amount of effort and time. So that is how the recovery seems to be like forever long, to be honest. Yeah.
Thank you, Sai. So I think that makes the conversation shift. The question is not whether cybersecurity tools are expensive. The question is whether underinvestment is actually ending up becoming more expensive. If a $5 million preventative investment can reduce a potential $40 million exposure, that becomes a strategic business decision, not a technical debate. So, when you look at a typical industrial organization today, it's really no longer just a plant floor. It's connected to enterprise IT systems, SaaS platforms, third-party vendors, OEMs, cloud services, and remote maintenance channels. Connectivity improves efficiency, but it also expands the attack surface. Sai, where do you most often see exposure expand or in this interconnected model?
Rightly chosen word, yeah, our interconnected model. Let's dissect or postmortem that word, right? So interconnected, you're connecting something internally, and what is on the other side? Something on the remote, right? Something external. Yeah. So that really that clearly defines us. Remote access is a major entry point. You got remote access to an OT environment, right? Which has like a very vast landscape. You can attack any vulnerable entry point, right? And you can get good control of it. Being a bad guy, there you go. Like, and these bad guys can be anyone. You got a lot of vendors whom you work with. Third party risk management again comes into the play, right? And because like a lot of temporary vendors, access becomes permanent if that is not watched properly, and that leads to access creep, access privilege creep, right? So yeah, I think a flat network architecture separates IT and OT departments, right? And the unmonitored third-party connections really bring a lot of risk. So that is how I often see exposure in an interconnected model. We see like we think someone from outside is helping us, but you never know who's harming us because all it takes for a bad guy to win on one day, right? When we are protecting people and technology, we have to win every day. So yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Sai. I think that's very well said. Namas, from a governance perspective, is leadership fully aware of how complex this connectivity has actually become?
Often they are not, yeah, but there are multiple reasons to it. The first would be why we need to have additional, the connectivity points, right? And as I said, there could be many third parties which are connecting to your environment. They need an access to that one. Or there could be many established connectivity which are not monitored, right? And getting all those details is a complex situation. However, the leadership tends to view this as a digital transformation and increased connectivity as indicators of progress and efficiency, right? Because if you have a third party who can support the environment that can create the digital transformation, that can create the progress, they look at that point of view. But as a cyber professional, every new integration point introduces additional dependencies and expands the attack surface. So that is the point as a cyber professional, we all needs to think about it and how we are going to protect it, right? So without disciplined network segmentation and continuous monitoring, that growing complexity quickly turns into systematic vulnerability. That is the key. So we need to have a network segmentation as we are talking from the beginning. And also, we need to do the continuous monitoring. These two are the keys for this.
Thank you, Namas. So efficiency and exposure are rising together, and most organizations have expanded connectivity faster than they've actually strengthen the control, which leads us to the next reality. Why is securing OT so much harder than securing IT? Well, we've seen how interconnected modern industrial environments have become. Now, let's examine why securing these environments is fundamentally different from securing IT. So, Sai, let's start with the most obvious constraint. Why is patching in OT not as straightforward as in IT?
Yeah, I would like to take a couple of minutes here and give you a real time example. Yeah, right. We often use the terms information security and cyber security. What exactly we professionals do, right? We are not responsible about policing around all the leadership team, operational team saying, you don't do that, you don't do this. No, we are not for that, right? You got to do something for the business, enable it, right? We're going to set the right way for you. That's how we're going to help you, right? But what happens is there we are using IT and security of IT to enable the business. But here, OT is directly related to make a business work, make business run with money, right? Which is so important for a business to evolve and exist. So I cannot really stop my production, which is completely irrelevant to the OT environment. There are because like shutting down an OT environment means I'm just stopping my production, right? I'm losing my revenue, and there are my clients will literally, hire new maybe lawyers to send me a penalty notice, right? All of that is there. So that is how it will become so it's a tough pill of decision to make to the decision makers sitting on the top management, right? Because they see, oh, okay, let me run the business today and postpone the patching later on because this is important for the business and this is important too. Let me do it anyway, right? Because I'm safe now. Yeah. So that's how people see it. So that is why patching is delayed and it is sometimes staged carefully, which is okay, but unfortunately sometimes it is avoided entirely, right? Thinking of enablement of business, but by the end, you lose the business anyways. Yeah, if you don't correctly secure it.
Thank you, Sai. And I think that delay often ends up accumulating technical debt. Namas, what does that mean from a risk perspective?
Yeah, it means that risk is being silently accepted rather than actively managed. So that's what it means that. And for example, if the legacy operating systems remain in protection, that creates ransomware attacks, right? That invites ransomware attacks. And if firmware updates are not are deferred, as Sai said, let's postpone that. It means that malware that disturbs the control logic will be in place, right? And if authentication mechanisms stay weak or outdated, which leads to unauthorized access to PLCs, HMIs, and SCADA systems. So we need to consider all those points to do the patching. Over the time, these accumulates gaps and increase exposure and make the environment progressively more difficult and more costly to defend. Whenever we, as a cyber professional or a trusted advisor, we go to the client and we say that this patching is a stable state, right? And it's like brushing your teeth every day. You need to make sure you need to do the patches. Otherwise, it accumulates and it hits the environment so badly, and that impacts the overall visibility as well.
Thank you, Namas. So I kind of want to talk more about visibility. Sai, how many organizations truly have a real-time OT asset inventory?
To be honest, it's really seldom that I have seen a few companies, like very few. Okay, because uh, again, pointing out to one of the discussion points which we spoke about, discussed, right? Not having a proper inventory, they do not maintain a proper CMDB, right? And especially for OT, they neglect it a lot because sometimes I've heard people, okay, this is a very complex system and this has a lot of entries that I have to do into the CMDB. So let's pass it on. Let's, on a high level, just put it as an, OT monitor, right? But what exactly does your OT monitor have? You don't list your CMDB, right? You don't list your components. So without accurate asset visibility, uh, how you going to prioritize what is a strong point for a bad guy to enter and a weak point for us to protect immediately, right? How are you going to prioritize that? So that's again like becoming a guesswork. You yourself are getting into a guesswork right there. So I think that is to answer your question, very few have. Very few organizations truly have real-time OT asset inventory. Unfortunately, they neglect it. Yeah.
Thank you, Sai. And then I think there's protocol complexity as well.
Uh, see, protocols are the rules, right? I mean, exactly. You're spot on. It relies on standardized protocols. One good thing with OT systems is they operate on proper set of 15 to 20 different industrial protocols, right? When we compare it to IT, we got like many, like you can 2x or 3x of those protocols are like 10x sometimes, right? Depending upon the IT system you're dealing with, right? So that is how many of which lack built-in controls, even though the protocols are very less, right? For HTTP, you got HTTPS. The next version got security into it, right? Embedded directly. It is baked in, not bolted on, right? So monitoring and segmentation becomes technically demanding in these kind of situations where the limited set of protocols do not have built-in security controls. Yeah.
Thank you, Sai. And so I want us to assume a worst case scenario. Production systems are encrypted, operations are halted. Sai, what do you think happened in the first 24 hours?
To be honest, chaos. Chaos everywhere, right? That is what happens, right? People, because like if you're not really uh planning what if I fail, you're basically planning to fail directly right there, right? If basically you're failing to plan, that means you're planning to fail, simple as that. That's an analogy which I always use. Sorry, I kind of twisted my words. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. So what exactly happens in the 24 hours? uh you know Someone who really got a good chunk of experience and they know how to handle their OT environment, they first contain it. Yeah, they start with uh, the network isolation, the impacted area, whatsoever is under impact. This is smartly isolate that, right? And they always verify if there is an immutable backup, right? Until this particular point of time, whatsoever is in question is that backed up, right? And next comes all this is a part of assessment as well. I would say these are some pre-assessment activities, right? Then we step on to the actual assessment. Okay, so I know a little bit or a minimal. I got some minimal knowledge about what exactly is impacted. So now, let me actually validate what is you know impact a ratio, like what all systems are impacted, and most importantly, validate if the systems are not compromised to that extent where you cannot recover them. Yeah. So in OT, that is the thing, yeah, where you cannot really rush to restoration because you got not checklist of items. There is a different ecosystem behind each component you handle, right? So you cannot rush to restoration, simple as that. So you contain, isolate, assess, and validate things. Then yeah, you go ahead with the next steps of maybe restoring once you have a proper validation in place.
Thank you, Sai. And then I think comes the executive decision next to pay or not to pay.
Yeah. So this decision should never made in the middle of crisis without a predefined cybersecurity policy. So I can say three important things. The one is to have a very clear cybersecurity policy, which talks about the ransomware-related concerns and how to pay or not to pay, right? So that decision has to be taken. Second is board and executive leadership must establish a clear guidance in advance, defining under what circumstance the payment may to be considered, right? And who has authority to approve it, and how legal and regulatory and ethical implications are evaluated. So that's the second thing. So we need to have a very clear guidance, and that guidance has to be part of the cybersecurity ransomware policy. Then this framework also clarify the role of cyber insurance, law enforcement engagement, and communication strategy. Cyber insurance is the key because when you get a cyber insurance, you can opt out or opt in about the ransomware, and they have got a certain specific things that we need to take care before we get a ransomware in place, right? Ransomware money back into our company. So we need to consider all these things in a right way, and that has to be in the policy. Without these decisions made ahead of time, organizations are forced to improvise under extreme pressure, often with incomplete information, turning the cyber incident into a broader governance and leadership failure if we don't have this in place.
Thank you, Namas. And I think that improvisation in crisis turns out to be really expensive. Recovery is not technical execution alone, it's leadership preparation. And many organizations focus heavily on prevention but underinvest in recovery governance. So the real maturity question is not just how well you prevented attacks, it's how well you respond when one succeeds. So we've discussed what happens when things go wrong. Now let's talk about how to reduce the probability and impact of that scenario. Prevention OT is not about adding more tools, it's about discipline architecture and governance. So, real quickly, if you had to prioritize preventative controls in OT, where would you begin?
I think I'll just start with, separating my crown jewels, right? I just don't expose them directly, right? So if you need some information and actions from outside, just try to put a shield in between. That may be a bastion host, that may be a mid server, that may be any interface for that matter. Just isolate that with proper segmentation. That is the very first primary step I would take, right? And there are sometimes, while networks are segmented or architected, right? So they're architected flat, and flat networks are the fastest way to amplify impact, right? So strong separation between your IT and OT environment within OT zones really reduces your blast radius. That's like your brownie point directly. Yeah, score that. And second, secure the remote access, right? So just don't let some external person access your crown jewel OT environment, as simple as that. Most incidents begin through exposed or poorly maintained remote connections, right? And ultimately, I would focus on what exactly do I have, a visibility into that, right? This is my asset. Okay, let me know everything about it, right? So that I can defend anything that happens to my asset and CMDB, right? So asset inventory and CMDB, if you don't know what you have, you cannot really protect it. Simple as that. So these are the top three things I would consider and prioritize as preventive controls in OT. Yeah, that's where I begin. That's my starting point, and I would like to end with that. Yeah.
Well put, Sai. And Nellis, from a leadership standpoint, which preventative element is most overlooked?
I can say executive preparedness is often most overlooked preventive element. Many organizations invest heavily in technology controls, but far fewer invest in rehearsing how leaders make decisions under pressure. So that leads to the tabletop exercises. Without regular tabletop exercises or the tabletop simulations, clearly defined RTO and RPO targets and targeted coordination between IT and OT teams, prevention remains incomplete. So when I talk about the RTO and RPO, we need to have this defined not from the technology perspective, but from the business perspective. So business has their own defined the recovery time objective as well as the recovery point objective from the OT perspective that we need to consider, not just IT, RTO, and RPO, right? So when an incident occurs, the gap is usually technical. It is gap is not usually the technical; it is the lack of the executive decision making and cross-functional alignment. You can see in any company, right? The technology-wise, they have got standard operating procedures and they have got everything. But those standard operating procedures for one incident plan might not be aligned with the OT incident response plan. So that is the key. So the rehearsing, having a tabletop simulations or the tabletop exercise is the key, which is often overlooked from the leadership perspective.
And I think governance ties it all together. Clear ownership, clear escalation paths, defined crown jewels, continuous monitoring, and increasingly AI-driven detection for anomaly identification. So prevention is not a single control, it's layered discipline, architecture, visibility, access control, governance, and simulation. And when implemented correctly, it reduces both probability and recovery time. So far, I think we've discussed how to reduce risk within existing environments, but resilience is not really static. Technology evolves, threats evolve, operational dependencies evolve. So, how do organizations stay ahead rather than react? Sai, why is an OT sandbox environment becoming increasingly important?
Good question, yeah. For the simplest of reasons, you just don't want to risk on an asset where you have invested a lot. Don't experiment if that's so expensive and so precious to us, to the business, because it is generating revenue to the company, to the business, right? It is enabling and ensuring everyone is having some work to do day in, day out, right? So that is why if you just want to experiment something, go do it in a, replicated environment where you do not have any impact, but it allows you for safe validations, right? You can just simulate attacks for fun, and you can test how exactly some strategy that came up to your mind actually work in real time environment, because you're working with a replica environment, right? It is just that you're neutralizing the impact to zero, not even near zero but zero. So it turns prevention into measurable engineering, and it will help us that, oh, okay, this guesswork is perfect. No, no guesswork is perfect because you're obviously guessing it, right? Just do that, do it again, uh, test it until the test environment fails, right, to prove something. So that is how you're going to use Sandbox. Yeah, that is why it is so equally important, like having a real-time environment so you can experiment things. And yeah.
Thank you for that. And Namas, from a leadership perspective, what value do you think this brings?
Yeah, from the leadership perspective, it fundamentally changes the investment conversation, right? Instead of requesting budget based on hypothetical risk or fear, you can demonstrate value through controlled proof of concept and measurable outcomes. Very important, right? And we always talk about analysis paralysis, right? And we do all analysis, but what is the expected business outcome? We don't know at that time. So when we do the real proof of concept, you can clearly show the value to the leadership team. So a sandbox allows leaders to see tangible reductions in exposure, validated controls, and improved operational resilience before the changes even touch production. Very important, right? In the sandbox itself, you are going to do the entire control testing. You are validating that, and you are talking about the operational resilience than before the production hits, right? So this alignment between cyber investment and operational performance builds credibility, supported information, informed decision making, and also ultimately strengthens the board confidence. So if you go with the fact-based numbers and with the results, then board can invest on this particular project in a right way, and they have a confidence.
And I think that's also where structured vendor collaboration and AI pilots become relevant. Resilience planning for the future requires three things: is testing, measurement, and continuous improvement. Organizations that treat OT cybersecurity as a one-time compliance exercise will always be behind. Those that build innovation capability into their resilience strategy move from reactive to adaptive. So, I want to ground this in reality. Namas, based on your years advising industrial organizations, could you share a real case that reflects the patterns we have been discussing?
Absolutely. I would like to cover two cases, but at least, I will cover one case in detail and I will touch upon the other case. There are two high-profile OT cybersecurity incidents happened early 2021. before the agentic AI came into the picture. Now the situation is completely different. With the agentic AI, the attackers can attack in a multiple ways with the multiple prompt engineering, right? So this happened in 2021. The one is a colonial pipeline ransomware attack, and other is a Wolfsmar water treatment plant breach, right? So two incidents happened, almost at the same time with the interval of 3 to 5 months difference. And just I would like to, touch upon the colonial pipeline, how the incident happens, and what is the lessons learned from those attack, right? So attackers logged into colonial corporate IT network using and password and an inactive VPN account that had no multi-factor authentication enabled. So this allowed the undetected entry into the enterprise network. So all the time in our conversation, we talked about the entry point, right? So this is the entry point the attackers got into, and the attackers get into the network. Once they are inside the colonial IT network, they install the dark side ransomware. The affiliates likely used valid accounts and possibly exploited software vulnerabilities to elevate privileges and expand their access. So they get into that, they put the dark side ransomware software into the mission, and they elevate the privileges through their access, right? And after that, they moved laterally. So they moved laterally through the corporate network to reach the key systems. They accessed various servers, ultimately stealing more than 100 gigabytes of data from file shares systems prior to launching the ransomware. So if you notice it, the file sharing system, they don't have any kind of a privilege access management in place. They don't have any identity and access controls related to RBAC or ABAC model in place, right? So it's just a lateral movement. They got all the information, and they did the double extortion ransomware, which means the attackers had, deployed a dark side ransomware and encrypting and displaying the ransomware note demanding payment. So they put the ransomware and they are demanding the payment. They also exfiltrated sensitive data like the billing files, business data, to threaten public release. That is called a double extortion, right? So they put the ransomware and they threaten that we are going to release it to the public. So at the end, a colonial operation, quickly halted the entire pipeline operations, and they isolated OT from further risk. They contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation, federal authorities, and investigation began. And they paid some ransomware with the guidance of the entire authorities, and they restored the systems. And also, they relied on the valid backups, and then the fuel delivery gradually restored. So this is the incident happened, right? And what are the lessons learned? Let's talk about that. The first one is you harden your remote access and authentications, the entry point. The whatever entry points you have in your OT environment, just harden it. If the third-party tools like TeamViewer are used, I'm just giving an example as a product, right? Restrict their connectivity and never leave them running unattended with default or common passwords. Common passwords are it is there everywhere. They use common password for all their service protocols, and there are many out there, right? That is the first one. The second one is network segmentation and firewalls. We are talking about it, right? Don't flat network in your OT environment, right? Isolate industrial control systems from corporate IT and open internet using DMCs and firewalls. So create the DMCs and put the firewall in place and separate IT and OT, right? That is the second thing. Third one is stay updated and limit exposure, right? Keep critical systems fully patched and up to date. Minimize the attack surface by removing or securing entry points. For example, require VPN connections into the OT environment, right? Rather than exposing services like RDP or VNC directly online, right? So you mandate that, if you are connecting to the OT environment, then you have to have the VPN connections in place, right? So that is a third one. The fourth important thing is related to defense in depth monitoring, right? So when we talk about the agentic AI now, the defense in depth is the key. So you employ a defense in depth strategy for detection, right? So this includes deploying intrusion detection systems like XDR, for example, the Microsoft perspective, and network monitoring tailored to ICS and SCADA protocols, right? So you need to have a OT network monitoring in place and aggregating and analyzing the log controls, both from IT and OT. That's very important. Some people will do only IT, or some other team will take care of the OT, but at the end of the day, two might not join together. So the aggregation of logs of IT and OT will give a clear information to the company, right? And that is the fourth one. And the fifth one is validate safety controls and procedures every time. So blend cybersecurity and physical, the safety. That is the related to the validate safety controls. And finally, I can say organizational preparedness info sharing. These incidents prompted industry-wide action, right? So we need to make sure the organization has to prepare the information, and they need to share it with other companies also. Like, many of the ISACA and other companies, they share the information about, hey, what's happening, and, how we can secure and protect our environments. That is the industry-wide norm. So we need to share the information, and that would help us a lot. So these are all the six critical things. If the company would have been taken care in a right way, then they can avoid this kind of a ransomware issue. And finally, even if the incident happens, how the resiliency or your business continuity in place, that is very important, right? Even you contain the attack and you can remove the attack, but at the end of the day, you need to run the business. So that's through the business resiliency, right? This has to be in place. And I would like to cover the other one also, but with the time constraint, we'll talk that in the later point of time. But yeah, that is a case study which I would like to provide it, Yavar.
Thank you, Namos. So we've covered scale, economics, structural challenges, recovery realities, and a real-world transformation example. I want to distill this into a few core takeaways. First, OT cybersecurity is not an extension of IT security. It's a distinct operational risk domain. Second, the most effective way to secure funding is to frame OT risk in financial and continuity terms, not technical terms. So, if there's one message to leave with today, it's that OT resilience is not about preventing every incident. It's about ensuring operational continuity when incidents occur, and that requires discipline, structure, and executive ownership. So, with that, I want to open the floor up for questions and maybe give a minute or two for some questions to come in. So I think rather than waiting, I already have a question here. I would think this is more for Namas. How do we justify OT security investment when we've never had a major incident?
Yes, a fantastic question, Yavar. So the absence of an incident does not equal the absence of exposure. So exposure is there, and the incident not hasn't happened. So incident can happen at any point of time. So we need to, reduce the exposure, right? So boards do not fund based on the history alone. They fund based on the risk probability and impact magnitude, right? When 90% of the organization report damaging OT events, inaction becomes the strategic gamble. Uh, my suggestion would be having a very clear, the risk profile or the risk governance in place on how we are going to measure the risk and what are all the key risks we need to consider, right? Because in an organization, there could be, thousands and thousands of risks out there from the cybersecurity perspective. As I mentioned one time, we need to look at the crown jewels, right? The same way we need to look at the high priority risk, then we need to try to close those risks and we need to get a funding from the board. So we need to justify through, some of the risk frameworks, industry standard risk framework, having consult with, the other leaders, or maybe getting an organization who can do the entire impact analysis. And finally, the results can be shared to the board and you can justify the OT security investment.
Thank you, Namas. So we have a second question here, and I think I'll direct this one to Sai. For organizations that are early in this OT cybersecurity journey, what is like the first practical step?
Right, even before thinking of starting an OT cybersecurity journey, right? Think of what is that they have started with in terms of assets. Imagine that, see that, right? Because fortunately, a lot of OT assets are tangible nature. I would say go figure out the visibility first, right? And then build a proper OT asset inventory that whatsoever you're seeing with your eyes and basically that you have used it in your environment, right? Get that documented, get that into the asset inventory or CMDB, right? Again, yeah, visibility followed by proper asset inventory. Then moving on to proper networking segmentation, right? Just don't expose your assets directly and ensure that there are no uh, illegal remote access environment possible from external attack surface, right? So that's the baseline I think someone should always think of before starting their OT cybersecurity journey in the early days, so that it will make them have a solid base foundation, right? They really have a good grasp of what is that they need to protect. Having that clarity will drive them a long way in this OT cybersecurity journey, in my point of view. That is where they got to start with.
Thank you, Sai. Okay, yeah, so we got another question. Should ransom ever be paid?
There is no universal answer, Yava, right? And we need to consider some of the critical aspects like health-related scenarios. For example, if the attackers attack any of the, the health-related companies, right? Then they would consider to make sure health is much more important. Patient life is much more important than, the ransomware, right? So people will take a decision on this. There
Yeah.
is no universal answer. As I said previously, we need to have a very clear policy on the ransomware. Each organization would have a different way to, attack the ransomware related questions. And definitely the legal, insurance, operational, and regulatory consideration must be evaluated in advance. So it is very easy to say, hey, we will put it in policy and all, but, you need to have a very clear decision from the legal and privacy and cyber insurance that needs to be evaluated in advance so that you can take a clear decision on whether you need to pay a ransomware or not. And I have seen some companies paid the ransomware, some are not, and they've got a very good backup. And some companies don't have even backup, but they have not paid, but they built the entire infrastructure by paying maybe 100 times more than the cyber investment, right? They paid and they created the entire infrastructure as well. So it's all
One
depends
good
on
example out
the
there,
company.
yeah, just to add to Namas, one good example out there who built everything from the scratch rather than paying ransomware is ABP manufacturers. Very big OT environment, right? I had a privilege of working with the risk assessment team to assess the ransomware risk assessment, how much was a monetary value that they lost. They just said no to the ransomware attackers. They built everything from the scratch. That is also one of the wise decisions a good leadership team would take. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Nama Sensei. So I think all these have been really good questions. We do have a few additional questions that have kind of come in, but given the time constraint, I don't think we'll be able to address all of them right now. What we will do is consolidate the remaining questions and reach out personally with detailed responses. If your question was not addressed today, please know that it's important to us and we will ensure you receive a thoughtful follow-up. So, everyone, thank you for your time and engagement. As always, we appreciate the opportunity to discuss OT resilience with you, and we will look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thanks,
Namas.
Lee.
Thanks, yeah.
Thank you, Sad. Thank you, Namas.